Thank you so much for clicking on this video where you're going to go through some questions. This is a mailbag video going through some questions I received from channel members. So we're going to get right into it. Here we have Joe asking some details about the TV contract. I'm not going to read through each of these questions. I'll put them on the screen so you can read through them, but I'll give you my thoughts there. And Joe's not really worried about the payroll aspect. We'll have another question about that, but he's a little bit more concerned about whether or not he's going to be able to watch the games. And I'll say there's a couple other teams that were in a similar situation with the Twins. I think the Diamondbacks and the Padres, if I'm remembering correctly. And when Major League Baseball took over their broadcasting, they made sure that actually the broadcasts became more available than they were before. So they actually had some packages on MLB.TV for those fans that they could specifically pay for their local team through. They also were available on more networks than they had been previously. So if anything, from the fan perspective, those teams at least got a pretty good deal when Bally or whoever stopped broadcasting their games. So this isn't something I'm too worried about. I think whatever happens in terms of, there's certainly some things to be aware of in terms of what this means for the Twins' income going forward. But I think from a fan's perspective, I don't have much concern at the moment that, if worse comes to worse and Major League Baseball is in charge of broadcasting the Twins, at least for a while, I think they're going to be just as, if not even more available than they have been. So I'm not a big fan of Rob Manfred's and his whole kind of tenure and everybody at Major League Baseball. He's just the figurehead. There's a lot of other people going on, but this is an area where they've been tremendous at broadcasting, streaming. You got to remember Major League Baseball had BAMTech that they sold to Disney. Like they have been at the forefront of streaming. I don't know that they get enough credit for that, how good Major League Baseball has done with that. So if it falls to them, I'm not concerned about losing broadcasts. Here's another question from Tristan. Outside of potential front office losses such as Levine, are any coaches also potentially leaving? I haven't really heard much. Jace Tingler was a former manager himself with the Padres. So he already has that on his resume. Now he's been a bench coach for a good team here. Him and Rocco seem to be, meshing very well. He's doing a great job. So you'd figure, probably eventually there's another team that's going to come around now that he has even more experience. I'm sure this has benefited him a lot too. I'm not sure, if you look at his coaching career, Jace Tingler, you could probably look back and kind of question if he was really ready for a managerial role at the time when he first got one. Not sure, that there hasn't been anything in the news officially, but that would be the guy, the Twins bench coach, Jace Tingler, who I would assume is probably going to have some people asking about him. We have a question here about the infield, and it is crowded. It is crowded, and you can read through that. There was one name that wasn't listed here. The question kind of ends with, is there anybody I overlooked? And I would say the guy that I did my last video on, Junior Severino, who was the co-leader in home runs in the minor leagues last season, a guy who started playing some first base with the Saints, but has mostly experience at third base and second base. A switch hitter. So a guy who has had success in the upper minors, so he's definitely put himself into this conversation as well. But I think kind of just this whole conversation, there's two things that really I take away. And I'm going to kind of sidestep the question a little bit. But I'll say, number one, the Spencer Steer trade, a lot of people are still kind of upset about the Twins having traded Spencer Steer and how good he looked for the Reds. I'm not sure how much of a need that guy is. It would be nice to have, I'm not saying that he wouldn't have room on this team, but this is just a great picture of how much infield depth the Twins have, and outfield, really. And number two, I think this really illustrates why it's going to be tough to keep Kyle Farmer around at like $6 million. I think $6.6 million was the arbitration number that MLB trade rumors put on him. It just doesn't seem like the Twins are all that desperate for that kind of a piece right now. And Farmer as a shortstop, that's valuable. in its own right, because that's a little bit of a trickier position. The Twins have a lot more people at the other spots, but I do think in a pinch, Royce Lewis can play shortstop still. Absolutely. Royce Lewis could still play shortstop. I think in a pinch, Willie Castro can play shortstop. There's some other guys in there as well. Polanco, I don't want Polanco at shortstop on a regular basis, but he can certainly play there a little bit. And obviously, Correa is going to be the starter there. And he kind of asked about how I would clear that blockage. And, Farmer stands out as the guy. I could see it kind of being similar to the Gio Urshela situation where it comes down to the deadline to tender contracts and he gets dealt maybe somewhere else. Maybe it works out differently. I don't know. But he's certainly a guy that stands out. I don't think Donovan Solano is going to be back. He's a free agent. Willie Castro will be back. He's under team control still. Nick Gordon, I think they'll keep around, but they might non-tender him as well. But he's at a very reasonable price. The only thing that's challenging about Nick Gordon is he's out of options, so he has to be on the Twins. Can't have him in AAA. He'll not clear waivers. He'll be out of the org by then. So that's kind of a tricky situation with him. But yeah, that's certainly a thing. There's and Brooks Lee and Austin Martin are definitely going to be putting themselves in the major league conversation before too long. We have another question on Austin Martin, so I'll add more on him in just a moment. Gray is asking also about the TV contract, but his question is more on the revenue side and kind of asking about how that might impact how the Twins operate. If I'm just looking at this, I would assume, this is going to change things. They're going to be concerned. This is a big chunk of money that they're not sure about. But everything they've done up to this point tells me that they're not concerned about it. This whole TV situation has been a big question mark for a long time. It's not like this popped up out of nowhere. They've known this has been coming, and they still signed Carlos Correa to the biggest deal in team history. So it didn't prevent them from making that big of an investment in Carlos Correa. They still signed Pablo Lopez to an extension. That didn't prevent them from that. So from my perspective, just sort of looking at how the Twins have played things, it doesn't seem like they're very concerned about it. Yes, it is up in the air, but they must have some kind of assurances or, confidence that things are going to work out well. So I don't think that this is going to really impact how they, go about free agency or, whether they push young, cheap guys up or whether they try to get rid of a Buxton. I don't think that that's going to impact it. But we'll, again, that's completely just sort of looking at how they've operated to this point. David is asking for my favorite trade targets or free agent targets. There's a couple first basemen that really stick out to me. Pete Alonso, if the Mets are interested in trading Pete Alonso, that would be such a huge addition for the Twins. And then Rhys Hoskins is the free agent guy that I think could be a very interesting target. Has missed this whole season, a 30-homer guy himself. Both these guys are a couple right-handed hitting first basemen. I think this team needs a big-time power hitter. I know that's going to rattle some people's cages. This team that struck out more than anybody in baseball, and I'm throwing out these big slugging guys that strike out quite a bit. But I do think they need a more terrifying threat in the middle of the lineup, and those two guys kind of stick out to me. Speaking of Pete Alonso, there's another question on Pete Alonso. I threw him out, and there's been some kind of whispers that he might be out there on the trade block. But, Steve Cohen, I just imagine, is probably just going to spend a bunch of money again. And that obviously worked out really horribly for them last year for the Mets. But they got themselves out of it. They traded away Scherzer, they traded away Verlander. So it's like, how much did that hurt them? I don't know how much of the money that they ate in those trades or whatever, but I don't know if it even matters to that guy. Steve Cohen, I think it would spend, almost twice as much as any other owner and not really break a sweat too much. So I'm not sure if it'll all come down to how badly the Mets want to deal Pete Alonso, and my gut tells me probably not that badly. So we'll see how that kind of progresses through the offseason. On Thad Levine, potentially going and being the Boston GM. He's been interviewed for that position reportedly. I'm not really worried about it because these guys have been in their positions, Falvey and Levine, for quite a while now. And you have to imagine there are people below them that have proven they're ready for the next step, that they're in line for a promotion. So Thad Levine kind of getting out of their way, and I don't know which of the front office people is in that kind of next person up, but it would, the team's having success. You would like to have the front office remain the same. I think that would be good, but it's only a matter of time before the Twins will probably lose the people below Falvey and Levine to other jobs if they don't get promoted here. So, I guess I'm kind of thinking of that in terms of these aren't parallels. It's a totally different way. But, how Wes Johnson, when he left as pitching coach, that seemed like a disaster when Wes went back to college. But Pete Mackey stepped up, and I was pretty shocked that they actually made him the full-time pitching coach. And Twins had like their best pitching staff in ages. So, and I think he did a good job. So, that's kind of how I envision a potential Thad Levine exit. Like, yeah, he's been such a central guy for so long, but you don't know. The next person up might crush it. So, we'll see. I'm not too concerned about it. I would be more concerned if it was Falvey, probably. But as said here, Falvey was reportedly asked and declined to interview for that job. So, we'll see. The question on this one, I honestly, I guess I'll give an answer, but I just don't think this happens anymore. If you were to pick a prospect, which one would you pick to debut before age 20? There are not that many teenagers that get into the major leagues. If I'm not mistaken, there were no teenagers in the major leagues this year. It's pretty unusual for guys to reach the bigs that soon. But I mean, if I have to pick someone, it's going to be Walker Jenkins, the number one prospect in this system. Still only 18 years old. So he's got a year to do it. I'm not predicting that he's going to do it. I'm actually pretty confident he's not going to do it. It's very rare that you see teenagers in the major leagues, but that would be, I guess if I had to pick somebody, that'd be my pick. Ethan asking about the future of Austin Martin. I still really like Austin Martin, but he's definitely more of a complementary piece, maybe more of a bench guy than like a superstar or maybe even an everyday guy. But as a right-handed hitter who can play second base, center field, left field now, I don't think we're going to see him back at shortstop, which I think is good. I don't think he looked comfortable there. I don't think he was good there. I don't think you want him playing there at the major league level. But Austin Martin is right there. He's right there. He had a pretty solid year in AAA, hit for a little bit more power this season, which was nice to see. About as many walks as strikeouts. So he's a guy he would have been a great piece to have this year had he been, I think he was not quite ready. He's looking more ready now. But yeah, he'll be a really good guy to have. With Byron Buxton, we know the deal. His knee is an issue. Beyond that, he gets hurt a lot anyway. So you're going to want other guys that can play center field. And I do think Austin Martin is a pretty legit center fielder. He hasn't played there a ton. So every once in a while he looks a little bit rough around the edges, but he has all the athletic ability you want in a center fielder for sure. So I think he can really stick there and also play other positions. That's why I say he's a great piece for this organization in that matter, and especially since he's a right-handed hitter. He hasn't really crushed lefties or anything, but obviously you're a little bit more at an advantage as a right-handed hitter versus left-handed pitching. So I think he'll just be a really nice complementary piece. Top of the lineup type guy who steals a lot of bases. Very good base stealer. Not only is he a good runner, he is a very good base stealer. Does not get thrown out very often. Has a huge success rate. So, yeah, a really nice piece. And a guy who complements the roster super well. Austin Martin. Lucas asked about the Complex League guys. And, if you follow the channel, I don't really spend a whole lot of time on the short season leagues. This question is specifically about the Complex League. I don't know if you specifically meant the Florida Complex League, but the guy that stands out to me was in the Dominican Summer League. Demuri Pena had a giant year. He's an 18-year-old Dominican who hit .382 with a .453 on-base percentage. More walks than strikeouts. Did not homer. Is not a very big guy. Played second base, but also DH'd a lot. I think that kind of tells us a little bit about his possible lack of athleticism when you're that young and you're playing a kind of a non-premium defensive position. So I'm just curious. That's a guy his stat line really stuck out to me, and a guy who I will continue to look for in the future is Demuri Pena. But again, when you get down that far, I honestly don't pay that much attention to it because there's so many of those guys that end up not even making it stateside. Guy could have an amazing Dominican Summer League season and be out of pro ball in 2 years. It's so boom or bust, and there's so little information on those guys. There's so little footage on those guys. It's tough. Last question is, do I think Joey Gallo plays in MLB next year? I do think Joey Gallo plays in MLB next year, not for the Twins. My whole problem with Joey Gallo was how bad of a fit he was on the Twins, really. Did not need another left-handed hitting, slugging, boomer bust, big strikeout guy on this roster. I'll take a right-handed version of Joey Gallo right now because I think that would complement this roster much better. But there are other organizations where Joey Gallo is a good fit, and especially since he brings some defensive value. So I think Joey Gallo will be in the league next year. Thanks for checking this out. Thanks to all the questions, members. I really appreciate it. Here are the premium members. Thank you all. We'll talk again soon.